Palden lame shabla solvade. Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Kar Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siti Hum Hum. Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Kar Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum. Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Om Guru Vajradhar Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Je Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendu So Uyun Sunge Nawa Tsedu So Tseji Nyingne Sowa Debe Te Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshu Ila Sambe Dede Malu Pa Geme Lunge Drubra Jinge Lo Tsoni Sodan Dikdun Shape Dunge Namge Yings Labchen Tsoni Yonsu Zoba Dan Chera Nyetun Chawara Jingil Jancho Pargi Nyinsen Tukun Tu Nyu Peme Siudru Lekshur Jancho Drube Gegen Kunshi Shi Tungen De La Drubra Jingi Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chemin Samjorang Nyemba Shiwa Chedan Tumbe Dudun Malu Pa Beme Lungi Drubra Jingi Lo Dorna Tingne Tsera Tam Techi pardo nekab tamche tu rese kyamne lama kele me tukche chingi dala siksu gongyab drewe nyamda dacha la chetsun lame tuche rabgon kodan songe nawa dralme tu nyamsu nyongwe kesan tobra sho kewa kuntu yanda lama drame cheki pela longche chin sadan lamge yenten rabzo Dorje change kopa nyurtob sho pakyuke kudandagi pakyuke sundandagi nga pakyuke tugdandagi tenyerme chikto chingi lo makyuke kudandagi lo makyuke sundandagi nga Makyuke tugdandagi tenyerme chikto chingi lo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Soha Sashipu ki choshi to tamare ravaling shi nide gempadi sange shinto mikte ulwarki drokun namda shingla chupar shoyedam guru ratna mindrala kam niryatayami Sangye chedan soge chonam lai chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dage jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chedan tsogi chonam la chanchu pardo dani kyapsuch dagi chushe gibe sonam kin drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chedan tsogi chonam la chanchu pardo dani kyapsu chin dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupar sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. In a, in a, in a, in a process of training, as we train, there's a very important part, which is constancy. And at the same time, this constancy needs, from time to time, to have a certain incentive. We need, as we choose a path and walk in a certain direction, every once in a while we need a certain incentive that renews our energy. And at the same time, it's important every once in a while, in addition to this incentive to renew our energy, we should also see if we're doing the right thing, because it's possible that I put a tremendous amount of energy in a direction, but then when I check, I see that I'm going in the wrong direction or the opposite direction. Instead of going where I want to go, I'm just taking the lakeside route. So as we train, as we transform, as we train our mind, and this is the fifth of the 7 points. One is understanding if we're doing the right thing or not. Because, I repeat, as we saw in the previous days, the practice of Lojong doesn't have to do with studying, it's not about, oh, how beautiful that I received these teachings that end there. No, it's about a choice, a life's choice, about putting oneself in the game, about making choices that are then applied to every area of our lives. As we saw yesterday, point number 4, the integrated practice in a lifetime. But when we make choices that touches every corner of our lives, at the beginning there's that falling in love with Dharma. And then normally what happens is that when you start already at a high gear, then after a while one can't maintain that strength, that energy, and then maybe someone falls or one feels stalled because there's not the energy to go forward, or maybe one asks oneself, what he's doing. And this, generally speaking, this kind of crisis is important, because after that falling in love with the Dharma, then after that there is a kind of crisis where one needs to ask oneself the sincere question, where am I going? What am I doing? Is this working for me or not? And from that to find again a stability, find a path that is constant and stable. Normally when there's this initial phase of falling in love with the Dharma, one expects immediate results. And there are some, also because the practice is similar to an exam, or rather, so we go from one side to the other, regardless, right to left, left to right. So if we go from left to right, for example, what happens is the mental defilements that we need to face, they are up on top, and the higher they are up, then the more coarse they are. And from below, that represents the amount of effort that we need to put in to face that mental defilement as an antidote. So the coarser the bad habit, the negativity, the mental defilement, the weaker the antidote can be. And then gradually, as that mental defilement becomes more subtle, more and more and more subtle, deeper, then the greater the amount of effort and time and ability needs to be greater and greater. I imagine a table. Let's imagine a table, a wooden table that's full of is porous, and it's full of garbage on top. Let's just imagine a really dirty table where it's all leftover food and cups and all sorts of garbage. When you get there to clean, at first, we just take a broom. It's so dirty. I mean, it's dirtier than the floor, so let's just use a broom. And as we clean, with just a little bit of effort, we're able to clean a lot of that table. And so that initial effort is important, because with not much effort, we received great benefit, or we saw a huge change, and we feel satisfied, and it seems clean. But then we start to notice the stains. And we could feel, it looks even dirtier than before, but actually we're just seeing what we couldn't see before. And to take away the stains, first we take away anything that's oily on top, or some kind of something that's the sticky parts or something. But then that we say, oh, okay, that's nice. That's nice. We're able to take away all the we take away all the stickiness. But then we see the real stains under all that, and there you really need to elbow grease. You need special products to clean that. You need skillful techniques, and because if I don't have the right detergent, I can use the sponge for hours and days, forever, and it won't clean it. And it seems more difficult, and one can say, how is it possible with very little? I took away so much, and now that tiny little stain, I just can't get rid of it. And then maybe we say, that stain is fine. We just leave it there. But that's a problem, because if you leave that stain without facing it, without cleaning it, it seems like it's just there. But then you can see that then all the dirt from deep inside will come out like mushrooms, and it will become rotten. Imagine soil full of poisonous plants, and we cut the plants and the branches, but if we don't go deeper and eradicate the roots, those plants will come back. They'll grow back. And that's why I explain that the path, our path is like this. The deeper our mental defilements are subtle, then the greater the method needs to be advanced, and the level of effort is ever more. If you think that along the path you need to put in less effort, no, it's the opposite. As we develop spiritually, the effort we need to face and to grow actually is greater, even if we wish it were different. But the good news is, it's true that you need much more effort to take away that effort, but as you're doing that, then I can eat on a clean table. Similarly, it's true that I need to put more effort to face the deeper traumas, these imprints of my deeper mental defilements. At least I don't have the manifestations of more gross level defilements. And here we go back to the first day of teaching, where we talked about the 6 awarenesses of listening when we listen to the Dharma. And the first is, just to recap quickly, I am like the patient. He who transmits the Dharma is the doctor. The teachings are the medicine. It's by taking the medicine that we get cured, and by putting into practice the teachings, I am following my treatment, and I can be healed. And this process is long and gradual, graduated. It's like we said yesterday, one thing is the beginning of the healing process, where we take away the more gross symptoms. Something else is getting to a certain point of our healing process where we have created such a great stability with our healing, with our health, that we instinctively want what is good for us, but this is not immediate. So along this process, it's very important for us to do those things we said before. Number one, we need to understand if we're going in the right direction or not. Also because according to the level where we find ourselves, according to the mental defilement that we have in front of us, the challenge we have, the method to use will differ. The time necessary is different. So one thing is understanding if we're doing the right thing or not. And the second point is renovating our energy to continue in the right direction. Because even if I see I'm doing the right thing, I need to renovate my energy, renew my energy. And this has to do, this is the fifth point of the mind training that says, it says, the measure of having trained the mind, Lojong and Settenpa. So this moment of check, the check of one's own mind training. And the verse says, so Chokung Gompa Chiktudu, integrate all teachings into one thought. Integrate all Dharma into one attitude. And, the primary importance should be given to the two witnesses. Yide Bashin Gyuduten, constantly cultivate only a peaceful mind, or joyous is better. Yi is mind, and De is happiness, but also joy, the state of well-being. But there's also the word peace. The word peace in Tibetan is interesting. It's a Shi-De. Shi-De is made up of two parts, Shi and De. Shi is to pacify. It's a conflict that is calmed. Shiva means where there's tension, and that tension subsides. It's a state free of tension, free of conflict. De means happiness. So peace is free of conflict, free of tension, where one feels this feeling of well-being and happiness. That's the concept of peace. And Yide is a happy mind, joyous mind, an inner state of well-being. So when it says Yide Bashing Gundu Dem, so no matter where you find yourself, constantly cultivate only a happy mind, an inner state of joy and well-being. Now, it can also be peaceful, but it's better to be translated as joyous. And the measure of a trained mind, the state, one can say, I have completed my training. The measure of a trained mind is that it has turned away. In other words, we can say it's gone the other direction. We can say when the mind has gone the other way. Lokpayin means to invert direction. So like it's turned around. And there are 5 great marks of a trained mind. The trained mind retains control even when distracted. Now we'll see point by point. Chukung Gompa Chik Tutu. Integrate all teachings into one thought, into all teachings, all dharmas into one thought. Let's look at the commentary. We learn many things, and when we get close to Buddhism, we see there's an infinite number of teachings on teachings and meditations. There's the part of Tantra, there's the part of Sutra, there's philosophy, there's silent meditation, there are the various yidams. There's an enormous quantity of things. There's the part of morality, etc. And we're practicing correctly when everything we go to learn, when they all go in the same direction. What is this direction? We eliminating selfishness, cultivating altruism. In other words, all practices that we do, everything that we learn, from karma yoga to sacred art to meditation in silence to puja, or anything else we do, the Buddhist philosophy study, when everything we do, it becomes a different tool for the same objective. And this objective, what is it? It's overcoming selfishness and developing altruism and developing love, compassion, altruism, and also developing wisdom, the correct view of reality. So this first point is important. When Atisha got to Tibet, for example, he was brought to one of the most important and oldest Tibet monastery in Tibet, Samye. It makes me, sometimes I think, here we see sometimes that there can be some kind of interferences here or there, but when they built the temple of Samye in Tibet, during the day they built up the temple, they constructed it, and at night it was taken down, and it took years and years. And the story says that there were actual spirits that would destroy what had been built during the day. There was this a little bit of conflict, rivals with these so-called spirits. So this temple Samye, which means beyond thought, it's something really incredible. There are many rooms. Now I'm a little bit confused. I think it's Samye. So it's this temple with many small rooms, small temples, and each one is dedicated to a different teaching. So there's part of sutra dedicated to morality and monastic vows, and then one dedicated to this meditation on bodhichitta or on renunciation, and then there's all the 4 classes of tantra. There's a room for each main divinity. So imagine a temple with many small temples, and each one dedicated to a different practice with a different aspect. And so when Atisha went to this temple, what he said was, "Now I understand why you called me. You have the Dharma, but you have it all separated. The path is one, and every aspect of the path is to be used on one soul path. There are different tools to help us on one path, and the danger is, and I add this, they were not the words of Atisha, the danger that I see is sometimes we see the method as the path. Like, I want to take a trip and I lose myself in the beauty of my car. And when So when I have many cars. You know, in the summertime, I have a convertible. When I need to go up into the mountains, I have a 4x4. And when there are many of us, I have a little bus. And I spend my life using these tools, and all of my attention goes to the actual means that I have. I know them really well. I study them well. I can imagine the different kinds of terrain, and I try them out. And I teach others how to use them, when instead the path is in front of me and I haven't even started. The teachings are called vehicles that are needed for one path. I mean, there are many vehicles, but there's only one path. We call it the Hinayana, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana. The small vehicle, the great vehicle, the diamond vehicle. They're different vehicles. One is not better than the other. There are times, and each has its own worth. There are times when the small vehicle is much more beneficial than others. At the beginning of our path, the Hinayana, the small vehicle, is much better because we don't have enough fuel. We don't have enough gas for a big car. We need a small, easy vehicle that will allow us to get to the next point. And then when we have more strength, more energy, then we can take a bigger car, a bigger vehicle. And then if we have the right capacity, then we can take a helicopter, which is the Vajrayana. But if we don't know how to use that well, it's better to take a bicycle. A vehicle is not necessarily better or worse than another. It adapts to our needs and characteristics that we have. And within each vehicle, there are many models. If you even take a bicycle, there are many types of bicycle. Usually they have two wheels. But there are some that are good on off-road, or on asphalt, or electric, not electric. And similarly, within the Mahayana, there are many when means, different vehicles. And we're out of the path when we lose sight. When we focus on the vehicles themselves and we lose sight of the path. And walking on the path is fundamental. Buddha Shakyamuni in a sutra says, once you've been able to go from one bank to another of a river, you shouldn't be attached to what brought you there. Some take a boat, some take a raft. One uses the resources that one has available, and one is not better than the other. They just adapt to our needs and our characteristics. So a rowboat can be better than a speedboat, depending on our needs. And we shouldn't be attached to the means, but in the direction that we're going. So Chokun Gompa Chik Tudung. So we are training well when we're able to use all the means that we have to walk along that same path. This one thought. When it says Gompa Chik Tudu, this one thought, eliminating ignorance and selfishness, and developing our wisdom and altruism. It all falls on this path. This also means to transcend the fact of being Buddhist or not. The point isn't about being Buddhist and having the membership card and the label that I'm a good Buddhist. Who cares? Because the point isn't about nourishing our own identity that we're creating. The point is about walking along the path of the development of altruism and wisdom to get out of suffering ourselves, to then help others do the same. So this first point, to see if we are training correctly, is to observe if everything that we do is going in that same direction or not. That's quite clear, isn't it? The second one, Pangpo Nikyang Tsiwo Tsung. Primary importance should be given to the two witnesses. Who are the two witnesses? Who are the two witnesses? Your godmother, your godfather, yourself, and others. What does that mean? One, let's imagine that we are training for a specific sport. Sometimes there are meets, matches, and when there's a competition, we can see if we're training well or not. What are the challenges? When do these competitions happen? In our daily life. When we find ourselves in situations where we normally would act in a certain way, maybe we're able to act differently. Or when we find ourselves in front of an object of anger, for example, or attachment, in all daily situations, there are challenges where we see if we're training well. And a fundamental point is looking towards ourselves and saying, oh, 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever it was, in the past, I would have acted in this situation like this, or would I have acted like this, or would I, is it better now? Is my attitude a little bit more altruistic now? Am I able to see others a little bit better now? Am I in the same situation, or has it even gotten worse? Do I have more patience? Am I able to lose my inner balance less often? Do I suffer for the same things? Let's remember the things we live, they're quite cyclical. So the first witness is ourself. We observe the situations that we experience, and we check to see if there's some kind of change or not. This is the first point. The second point, there are people that we interact with daily that are quite close to us, that know us well. And it's important to listen to their point of view as well. Not as a way to nourish our ego. Oh, he says that now I'm better than before. But the fact that the other actually works as a mirror for us. And it's true that we shouldn't nourish our ego, but we do need to nourish our self-esteem. Self-esteem means I'm doing the right thing. How wonderful. And there is a moment of a certain pride, a kind of joy that comes where we say, wow, look at this. Look at where I am. This is important. We should celebrate beautiful things and listen with an open mind to criticism as well. Because when someone criticizes us, if we listen to the criticism with an open mind, the possibilities are mostly two. We look at that criticism as a mirror, and we look at that aspect as it's told to us, and it helps us. It helps us see a weakness that we hadn't seen. So it highlights something that we need to better, and that's good news. A little bit like an exam. Sometimes, sorry if I say it like this, but when someone says, I need to I have an exam, pray for me. What am I supposed to pray? What are you asking for? That by doing the exam, nothing bad happens? Or that the exam process really shows you how things are clearly? Because if I don't want to see anything, I have like an exam, like a medical exam. But if I do a medical exam and something comes out, then that's good, because then it means that then I can see what's wrong, and that first step to remove that problem is seeing it. So if someone criticizes me and it shows me something that I before wasn't able to see, thank you. You've given me a new opportunity. When someone criticizes and we use that criticism as a mirror, but we don't see that defect in ourselves. We see it, let's say that we see it as a criticism. If we see that criticism as that doesn't actually reflect our behavior or whatever it is, then that's fine. At that point, we reinforce our self-esteem. So we shouldn't be afraid of criticism, because if I become defensive, I'm losing this opportunity to see myself better. For example, I've seen often someone criticize. Our spontaneous reaction is to go on the defense. And if we look at that, it doesn't have much to do with the content of what was said, but how it was said. And something we can do, we can try at least, to not connect with how it was said, but listen closely to the content. Because the way is maybe aggressive. That's not my problem. That's the problem of the speaker. It's the one who said it. It's not mine. If I'm nervous, for example, and I speak to you with aggression, if you actually if you get touched by that blow, then that's your problem too. But if you just see that nervousness as a manifestation of the other, it's like that person is going for a blow, and you just move aside so you don't get hit, but it goes right by you. So one shouldn't put oneself on the defense, but try to go beyond appearance, beyond the appearance, which can be a manifestation of the malaise of someone else. It has nothing to do with me, that I don't need to take that upon myself. And at the same time, I try to listen to the content with an open mind. Because recognizing our own weaknesses, recognizing what doesn't go well, isn't going right, is a huge quality. So we're accepting the present, and we're directing ourselves to the future to do better. So primary importance should be given to the two witnesses. So listen to criticism, listen to feedback, from other people. And even when someone, if they don't, maybe they compliment us instead of a criticism, we need to be careful. I mean, to remember that that compliment is in the other, not in us. If someone sees me as someone marvelous, faith, joy is not mine, is someone else's. I need to listen to the content. And maybe someone compliments me for something that, in my opinion, is not there. And sometimes compliments are actually criticism, because someone sees in me, someone sees something in me, and when I look for, I look inside and I can't find what that person is seeing. So maybe it's like a self-criticism. It can be because we can think, oh, I'm manifesting that, but I don't actually think that I have that within. It's also a criticism can be a compliment, and vice versa. So give importance to the two witnesses, ourselves and others. So we relate to others where we don't go on the defense, on the defensive. So what are the comments that others make of us? Let others be a mirror for us without getting defensive, and certainly without going on the counter attack. At the same time, we observe ourselves, how we're doing. So this same situation time ago, how would I have reacted? Oh, before, when I sat down to meditate, I wasn't able to concentrate. Now I can concentrate better. It's not perfect, but I'm doing better than before. When I'm in this kind of situation, I used to act like this, and now I don't. Let's observe ourselves. And this process of stopping and checking every once in a while is very important, because something that can happen is, as we go along, we never evaluate ourselves. As we don't do any self evaluation, and if we don't do that, we just see that we haven't gotten to the arrival point, and we don't see the steps that we're taking. It's like saying, I want to meditate for 5 hours without losing concentration for even a second. I've been here for 5 years, 10 years, and I'm not able. Well, before I wasn't able for 5 seconds, and now I can do it for half an hour. That's wonderful. So not only that we keep that focus of the where we want to get, but from time to time we need to see the steps we've taken and where we are now. So this gives us effort. This gives us the energy to go forward. So this is also part of celebration. It's important to celebrate the steps that we do take, even formally, physically, to do something, dedicate to celebrate the steps we've taken, and then redirect the mistakes, the steps we've taken that were in the wrong direction. So primary importance should be given to the two witnesses. And with this, we try also, just very briefly, to not get into an attitude that unfortunately happens sometime, which is becoming the victim of oneself or becoming defensive with oneself. Seems strange, but it happens. We're not the victim of anyone. We're simply walking with awareness. We're walking in a direction that we want to reach. But it's important to recognize where we are, to give us the energy and also to redirect ourselves. Because if I'm not getting anywhere, maybe I need to change my method, which doesn't mean that the method is wrong, but maybe it's not right for me, or maybe I skipped some steps that I should have taken. Yide washi gyundu ten. Ten means to rest on, trust. It says constantly. Gyun means constantly. Bashik with the only. So constantly cultivate only a happy mind. So there's a difficult moment, a sickness, fatigue, difficulties. What happens when we're in a difficult moment full of pain and trouble? What's the good news? Other than it will pass, what's the good news of what's happening in that moment? We are using up negative karmic force that was generated in the past. So we are diminishing past negative karma, and that's good news. But what's the better news even in that moment? There's a kind of there's a mirror, yes, but there's an opportunity to practice. It's in the moments of trouble, of difficulties, where I open up my heart towards others, where I see suffering also in others. Just as I suffer, others suffer. We see the similarities, and that creates closeness. We can practice the Tonlen, and we want others to be free from their sufferings in the same way that we want to be free from the suffering. So we see that because we know that the being this process of developing altruism is something joyous, which doesn't mean that it's always pleasurable. Sometimes medicine is bitter, sometimes the therapy is painful. And similarly, if we live difficult moments, practicing Lojong really, even if it's difficult, at the basis, there's the joy of walking along the dharmic path. There's this happy mind in all moments. It's the joy in cultivating love. It's the joy in practicing patience, in transforming ourselves in a positive way. It's the awareness of following a healing treatment path. So this is one moment. And then there are pleasurable moments. In those pleasurable moments, those joyous moments, beautiful moments that we live, even there we dedicate. So may everyone experience the pleasures that we're living. So we're practicing bodhichitta in that moment. We're walking our path. So that same mind of joy, this inner state, the joy of walking on the path of transforming ourselves virtuously, of gradually overcoming our limits and developing more and more a mind of altruism and wisdom. As we're doing that, there's the joy of that travel. And we can do this in all situations, and we maintain that joy of that travel, of this trip. This is one of the signs that we're doing the right thing. There's also a phrase of Milarepa that says, Milarepa had in his life, it's said that he had many, many material problems, and he also had sicknesses, very, very heavy pain. He had physical problems too. And there's a citation. He says, when I'm sick, I'm happy because I'm using up my negative past, my past negative karma, and I'm practicing bodhichitta. And when I'm feeling well, because I dedicate it to others, and I have the energy to feel good and get better and better. So here where it says yide, it's not the state of pleasure. We're not talking about cultivating a kind of euphoria, joyous euphoria, the state of pleasure. We're talking about the joy that's present when we're walking on a meaningful path, that is similar to the joy along a healing path, even when it's difficult on a very superficial level. It's happened to me to have like some like muscle contractions that, and I then having a massage to loosen those muscle contractions, which is incredibly painful. And the person would say, I'm sorry, I'm hurting you, but it's something that will bring me joy because I know that through that pain, I'm loosening up and I'm getting rid of these muscle pains. Of course, I prefer it to, for it to be possible without pain, without it being painful. But here, one of the signs of practicing correctly along our mind training path is when we're able more and more to keep our connection to the path and see that even when I go to that difficult situation, okay, which is difficult, but I'm able to have the awareness that I'm practicing a little bit more patience. I'm going beyond my self-centeredness and I'm able to see someone a little bit better. Remember, this path, practicing, is about getting out of our comfort zone, and it's not always easy. And when it isn't, when it's tiresome, difficult, there's always that joy of being on the path. It's like when you go hiking in the mountains, and it's very tiresome, but every step, there's this joy that one is getting closer and closer to the summit. This is the joy that we're talking about. This happy mind, joyous mind that is present in everything we do. We rely on this mind of joy, of loving others, of spiritual growth, of the Dharma that is more and more present the more present it is in every area of our life, the more we can see that we're practicing correctly. Instead, if we see that we're doing things, but the joy of walking on the path is missing, it means we're not practicing in the best way possible. We need to adjust something. Maybe we're doing many things, but we've lost the right direction. So it's important to cultivate this joy of our path. And it's one way to see if we are training correctly. And on this, I can say that people that I've known, the more spiritually developed, without doubt, without a doubt those who were the most joyous. One master of Lama Ganchen Kachin Lobsang Tsupo Rinpoche. He was the abbot of Tashi Lumpo in India. He was a master of Lama Ganchen, also one of my teachers. He was incredible. Of course, I mean, he was humble and simple. His level of knowledge was mind-blowing. He was among all the abbots of the great monasteries. He was the abbot. He was the abbot of a very small monastery. Tashilumpa was very small, and there was a meeting, a great meeting, where all the abbots would be present. When the whole religious elite would meet, some would come with various attendants, a beautiful car, the whole entourage, and he would come with the car falling apart, or maybe even a rickshaw, dressed with worn clothes and carrying his own chola. But whenever he arrived, all the abbots would just open up and let him pass. I remember once during the teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, imagine this enormous gompa. There were 5,000 people about. At a certain point, they imagine that it was the end, and then they all left, and there was a kind of stage, and the highest masters were seated there, and then there was a little stairs, and he remained, and then Lati Rinpoche was also one of the greatest. It was also an important master of along with Trijang Rinpoche. And they needed to go down, and they were saying, you go, no, you go first, you go first. There was this deep respect between these two, with affection too. And they were there for about 5 minutes at least. And it was kind of a respectful game, but it wasn't about formality. It was sincere. I remember this scene. This is after the teachings of the Dalai Lama. So Rinpoche was someone who I said that he was one of the most respected masters that I knew. And when Rinpoche Lama Ganchen would go to find him, go see him at the monastery in Tashi Lumpo, there was a beautiful relationship between them. There were a couple years. There was another Lama, Ketchuk Rinpoche, and then he spent many years in Australia after. And when they were young with Lama Ganchen, they were very friends, because in the south of India, Lama Ganchen had made a kind of, he built a very small house, a kind of hut, in a field in a cornfield, and he would do retreat there. And there, Lama Ganchen and Ketchuk Rinpoche, they would invite Ken Rinpoche, the abbot of the monastery. They would invite him there, and he would give many teachings and give empowerments. And he was very humble, very special. And in the 90s, when Lama Ganchen went to see him, and I think he left his body in 1996, when he would go to see him at Tashi Lumpo Monastery in India, he would wait outside the monastery with all the monks, about 150, and they would wait for him with katas and signs of auspiciousness. And Lama Ganchen would stop the car about 100 meters before, because he wanted to make prostrations along the way. So he'd get out in the middle of the mud, to make prostrations, and he would come running to him to stop him, say there's no need to do that. There was a deep respect between them. In any case, I remember also when he left his body, and we went for the first time in his room together with Lama Ganchen, and I saw Lama Ganchen cry like a baby, given the emotions at the moment. And one characteristic that Rinpoche had too, so in all the great monasteries, when someone needed to take a very difficult exam or when they had any kind of doubt, they would go to him. He was such an expert in sutra and tantra, and one quality that he had that was so special was, I was just a boy, and the first the first time I went to take teachings from him, very basic philosophy, and anyone in the monastery could have taught this, but I was so lucky to receive these teachings from him. And I remember there was this kind of legend that he didn't have a shadow, and which is one of the signs of having realized a rainbow body. And there was this window behind him as we were sitting, and I saw that the shadow that would come, the light that would come in, and then all the various all the different shadows, cast on the various objects. Compared to him, his was very, very faint, very faint. And I remember I was about 12 years old. I was naive, and I asked him, "Is it true that you don't have a shadow?" In any case, he was extremely kind, extremely loving, and wise. And what touched me, and just his presence deeply touched me. And we can learn so much from someone's presence, and the more developed they are, the more joyous they are, the more love and wisdom they have, the more they're able to have that inner state that manifests that. So a sign to see if we're able to maintain a deep joy that shows itself to the world, and not this joy that reflects only towards ourselves. And we see it with small things, little bit. So the more we're able to maintain a state of joy and happiness, it's a joy that's difficult to put into words. The more we're able to maintain an inner stability, regardless of the situation we find ourselves in other words, the less that outer situations or circumstances take us away from our stability or take us away from our path, the better it is. I mean, without having any kind of expectation to be special. I mean, he was one of the most special people I've ever met, and at a certain point, he found himself in a kind of trap where he had no choice. Somehow, it's like he found himself in a situation, this is my interpretation, where he had no choice between doing or not doing something. He was in front of two situations, both of which went totally against his principles. So what did he do? He needed to go to one place or another, and actually he was on his way. He had a fever and he died. He was already quite old, and so he had these great qualities. He was one of the most important teachers of Lama Ganchen, and one of the most important teachers I too have had. And it's this quality of joy that we have that we should try to cultivate. And I tell this story because it's someone that I saw who had this ability to have control over his life and also the moment of his death. When he said, okay, now time to go. So constantly cultivate only a happy mind, a peaceful mind. I mean, most of us are not there yet, and we don't need to expect that from ourselves if we're not there. We are where we are. When we're able to maintain this stability without losing ever our peace or our joy, regardless of the circumstances, that means that we've completed this training and really have won the gold medal. But now we're training, and the more we're able to maintain our training, the more you see that, the more clear it is that you are training in the correct way. The next part says, Jangwe Chunyi Lokpayin. The measure of a trained mind is that it's turned around or has inverted itself. What direction does our mind have now? It's a mind that is directed towards the I and the my. It's a mind, an attitude that is selfish, of looking at ourselves, looking solely at the I and the my. When it is inverted and my mind is directed towards others. So from selfishness, we have a mind of altruism. That means we've completed the path. It's just an inversion of inner attitudes. This inversion is something that needs to come gradually. It doesn't come from one day to the next. So how can I see if I'm training well or not? The more I can see that my attitude takes into consideration others, that I see others, that I'm able to breathe 3 times, and I don't follow this attitude of I and the my being the center, where I'm able to overcome more and more the 8 mundane dharmas, having less attachment to physical pleasures, mental things, my image, etc. And the more I'm able to love others, that all means that I'm going in the right direction. These are the signs. Sometimes I see, historically speaking, and also in nowadays, there's this idea that the signs of realization are some kind of mystical, magical things. I can assure you, if in front of you, if there were someone who starts to levitate, that person would become an object of faith. I mean, what would we say in front of someone who knows how to levitate? We would say, what an amazing realization, what a great master. But the greatest sign of realization that we can have is a deep state of altruism and love and wisdom. Someone who's able to maintain always a state of stability, no matter what happens. And this is what we should be looking for in ourselves and in others, because there are mundane and super mundane realizations. Mundane realizations are things that we can obtain, but with death, you don't bring them with you. So that's why they're called mundane. The super mundane are realizations that once you've obtained them, you bring them to your next life in the form of a predisposition. It's it's no longer a learning but a remembering in the next life. There's realizations that are brought to the next life. And mundane realizations are for mundane purposes. In Tibet, for example, it was very useful. Kangyok, for example, means fast feet. This was very practical. Being able to walk very quickly without getting tired was extremely useful. There were no cars, and other than walking through the mountains, there weren't means of transport. So there were people who would train for years in meditation techniques with their energy, their prana, their energy. So it's kind of walking and levitating, and they were able to cover great distances in very short amount of time. But these are realizations that have mundane functions. And there was a period in Tibet where these realizations were very important. They were techniques of without breathing for a long time, techniques to stay without eating. Once I watched a documentary on those who were able to not breathe, and for example, they had this closed, sealed room with a certain amount of oxygen, and according to the person, the age, and their physical state, they could see how long the person could stay in this isolated, closed room. At a certain point, this Indian sadhu, this meditator, who was dressed with just a very just scantily like this, just covering him. He was really quite old. He walked with difficulty. They closed him up in this room. After 45 minutes, they opened up again because they said, no, it's much more. And then he just smiles at them and then leaves. And if they had left him there for 3 hours, I'm sure he would have stayed there for 3 hours, because there are techniques of breathing where one uses just a minimum amount of oxygen. In Tibet, a lot of importance was given to these techniques. And one master said, we need to be careful to not. One master who said, be careful, don't lose sight of the path. That was Lama Tsongkhapa. And he said that mundane realizations are easy to obtain, and they end with death. The most important realizations are realizing love, overcoming the 8 mundane dharmas, correct view of reality. This is what we need to do more than anything else. So along our path, it is possible to develop certain levels of intuition, similar to clairvoyance, or listen to the minds of others, or talk to spirits. It's possible to do many things. But this is not our objective. It's not useful. Imagine listening to the minds of others. What they say, their speech is more than enough. So my main objective is to see if I'm training in the right way, and if I gradually am able to invert my ignorant mind, the one that grasps at inherent existence, towards a mind of interdependence and wisdom, where I am able to relate to this reality that is empty of inherent existence. The more I'm able to invert this, the more it shows that I'm walking in the right way. Is that clear? So the training is concluded when this turnaround is complete. And then we have Jongdang Chenpo Nadeni, which is there are 5 great marks of a trained mind. There, the 5 great marks of a trained mind, and there also there are 5 great marks. There are 5 great marks of a mind that is in the process of training. Let's see what they are. They say here. So the first one is the great patience, or Katup Chempo. Katup is not really patience. It's this ability to face difficulties. Katup is also this ability to work hard for something. This not resilience, no. Let's call it resistance, the great resistance, and then I'll explain what it means. Then we have the great mind, Sempa Chempo, this great state of consciousness. Mahatma in Sanskrit. Atma is that being. Mahagrande, that great being. And then we have the great virtuous conduct. And the great, this great ability to refrain, the great refrain, refraining from doing something. And then we have the great yoga. Let's look at them one at a time. What term did I use at the beginning? Resistance, the great resistance. Is this ability to not be overwhelmed by suffering itself. It's this ability that in front of suffering, one doesn't lose his balance or direction, one's peace. Dungat la supa in Tibetan is patience towards suffering, but patience is used not only of not reacting with aggression in front of an object of anger, but patience is also about being in front of something that's difficult, but we don't lose our own balance in front of that object. Of course, along our path, there are difficult situations, adverse circumstances, pain, physical pain, etc. The more we're able to not be overwhelmed by that, the more we're able to maintain our balance and peace, even in those circumstances, those situations. It means that we have this great strength, this ability to face situations. This is one sign that we are training correctly. The more fragile we are, the more easily we lose our balance for the minor thing that happens around us. That means that we have a lot of path in front of us. We've got a long way to go. But when we're less susceptible to external circumstances, because we have a greater resilience and stability, and we're able to maintain this. There's an extreme example. It's a story that you can see in the Jataka tales of previous lives of Buddha. At a certain point in his life, he talks about his 500 previous lives as bodhisattvas and 500 lives as animals. And he says that before he reached enlightenment, that he had about 500 animal lives and 500 human lives as bodhisattvas. So his path towards enlightenment included these lives as animals and also as bodhisattvas. It's interesting. He was a turtle. I mean, and a bodhisattva can manifest himself in any form, and the spiritual guides come also in animal forms, not just human forms. And in a previous life, Buddha Shakyamuni, I don't remember exactly the context, but he received a Dharma teaching and he was extremely grateful. And then he was blamed at a certain point, erroneously, for a crime. He was blamed for a crime. He was taken by the justice of the time, and he was tortured and killed. And as he was being tortured and killed, he doesn't lose for an instant his stability, and he doesn't generate, not even for a moment, a feeling of hatred for the one who was torturing him, because he clearly saw that he was exhausting past negative karma that he himself had created, and he, looking towards others, he generated compassion to them because he could see that they were actually generating seeds for future negative suffering, and that they were also victim of their ignorance. So he actually deeply wanted them to be free from this negative karma that they were committing. This is an extreme level. This ability to maintain this ability to not be overwhelmed and that happens. We're overwhelmed when we react with not accepting what's happening. We lose our own inner peace. We react with anger, hatred, and there are many examples that I can give, from very simple examples to the more extreme. So every one of us in our lives, according to the situations that we live, the more we're able to not lose our balance in difficult situations, or we are not overwhelmed by anger, etc. This is a sign that we are training correctly. The second sign is the great being, Senpa Chenpo. It's the altruistic mind. This attitude of altruism towards others, Mahatma, great being, is used for an altruistic being. The more altruism and love there is towards someone, the greater you are. You have a great mind. You're a great being. So an altruistic, a sincere and deep altruistic mind towards other is a great sign that we are training correctly. The more we're able to expand our heart towards others, this is the second sign that we are training correctly, that we're walking correctly along the path. We need to be careful here. Sometimes we can think that we are walking, but we're not, because this second point, sometimes it can happen that it's more important to be the one who loves than love. We're more attracted by the idealized image of being the one who loves others than be attracted by the happiness of others. Sometimes, if it's ever happened to you, it happen to yourself or someone close to you. Maybe there's someone's not well and someone wants to help, and the person wants to help, but the way the person wants to help is not the best for that person, and the person doesn't accept that help, and the person gets upset, and the person who wants to help gets upset, saying, "Oh, I want to help you, but you won't let me help you." And the person who needs the help needs to get out of his own suffering to allow that person help him. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's happened to me. I'm someone, for example, if it ever happens that I'm not well, then I just need to be alone by myself. I don't have that. I don't need to talk about it. If there's something there, just leave me alone. It's, "Oh, you don't want to tell me. Oh, you don't trust me." No, I just need my own space to elaborate this, and then it'll pass. And it's happened quite a few times that I had to somehow get out of my own malaise to create space to accept the help of someone else. And in this case, what happens is sometimes we're attached to this idea of wanting to help more than the idea of wanting that person to be better. We need to understand that we're here to serve others, not to be the great hero. And sometimes it's subtle that the line that divides the two, and sometimes we get lost in that. Sometimes we think we love someone, but we're actually just nourishing an image of ourselves, the one who helps, or our ego actually is able to hide itself behind this aspect of love. Better to nourish one's ego with a feeling of love instead of an attitude of hate, of course, but also better to love free of this. How do we know if we're doing this well? When we feel a need, when we have a need to show the good things we do, if we do something good and we're able to help someone, and if we feel this need to be seen, to be praised, recognized, that means that in addition to doing something positive and helping someone, we're also using that situation to nourish our own ego. And we need to be very careful of this trap. So the second characteristic is where we develop sincere and deep altruism, where we really put ourselves at service of ourselves and others. We're attracted to the happiness of every being, and we're joyous in doing so. I think that's quite clear, isn't it? The third great quality the virtuous conduct. So one's daily contact is the sign of someone who's realized this virtuous conduct. We see it in every daily action. When he eats, when he interacts with others, he speaks in a virtuous way. And when we say virtuous, we mean a positive interdependence. So it means that the practice of Dharma, and not only, but a conduct, a behavior based on love and wisdom is applied to every aspect of our life. So the more our conduct is permeated by the Dharma practice, by love and wisdom, generosity, patience, joy, peace, and the more we have a positive virtuous interdependence with others, then that's a sign that we're on the path. But when our conduct from dawn to dawn is virtuous, then that's the sign that we have completed this aspect, this quality. Then we have the great refrain. The refrain is when we have enough awareness of the law of karma that every action brings a result, and we do everything we can to avoid negative actions. We try to avoid any negative interdependence in every way possible, even the smallest, even the apparently insignificant. A sign of not being well trained is, well, that's just silly. That's something small. That's nothing. This negativity is nothing. But the more we go forward, the more in harmony I am, then every small thing that goes out of this balance, out of this harmony, I feel it more strongly. I'm able to avoid any kind of interaction that would generate suffering, the more trained I am. And it's interesting that when we go forward, gradually, we start with external behavior, physical behavior, violent or aggressive interactions with others, and this reminds me that the children are going to arrive soon. We have the winter camp now, so they're both for the winter and the summer retreat. There are 3 rules that they need to respect, and I think we all need to respect them here and outside of here. And the 3 rules that have been established for the summer and winter retreat for the children is we respect ourselves, respect others, and respect the environment. These are the 3 fundamental rules of conduct. In this case, when I'm able to respect myself and respect others and respect the environment, I make sure that I maintain a positive, virtuous conduct. And the more trained I am, the more easily it comes. But if I say, oh, well, that's not so negative, or, oh, yes, I made that joke, but who cares if that person got upset? The less trained we are, the more we try to justify our negative behavior. The more trained we are, the more we're able gradually to perceive the subtleties of our behavior. And we start from external behavior, and then we become more and more aware of our speech, and we're able to perceive how we speak, and when we speak, what we say, how it's said, etc. To get then to be able to observe our own mind, where we get to a point where one can see that mental defilement even before it has manifested, but has just is peeking around the corner. When one can really observe one's own motivation, can see that there's a little bit of selfishness, there's a little bit of attachment, and as they appear, we're able to apply the antidote and stop them. So refraining, having this ability to refrain, we refrain from negativities of body, speech, and mind. And when we say mentally, the mind, it's also the emotions, are mental defilements that we don't follow, and we're able to stop them before they manifest. So this is the fourth, or is it the third? It's the fourth of the 5 great characteristics of a highly trained person. So let me repeat, we start by maintaining a coherent behavior, and we recognize our external non-virtuous and more coarse behavior. For example, towards nature. For example, recognizing the indifference to the suffering of others. The way we eat, for example. For example, very often we eat with a selfish attitude, without gratitude, and without the awareness of what's behind our meal. I don't know how often we're able to really generate deep respect towards our food and everything that's behind that food, that meal. And then gradually, I have a more and more coherent behavior. And what's interesting is it's not about not having any kind of predisposition or imprint of a negative defilement, but I am able to not be overwhelmed by them. I'm able to not follow them. First on a coarse level, on a physical level, verbal level, and then mental level, on a coarse level, and then more and more subtle. The 5th great sign of having completed or completing the mind training. Nel Cempo, the great yoga. The word yoga, one meaning of the word yoga means the action, activity done in an excellent way. And in this case, yoga makes reference to our daily behavior, our daily interactions, what we do daily. One completes this great sign of the training of the great yoga when one's daily activities are inseparable from the activities of the Mahayana path. So when I'm sleeping, when I'm eating, when I'm talking, regardless of what I'm doing, it is deeply integrated into the process of developing love and morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, wisdom, on the basis of love and compassion. And when everything we do is integrated in the Mahayana path, then we are practicing the great yoga. This is another sign of having trained correctly. Let's remember that these 5 signs are not things that we don't need to see them only at their final state, because at that point we say, oh, well, okay, that's too much. But there are 5 markers, 5 to see if we're going in the right direction or not. So let's just recap quickly. What's the first thing we need to see? How much we lose or not our balance when we're in difficult situations. The more I'm able to maintain my center and my peace in difficult situation, that means that I'm on the right path and I am walking correctly on this path. That's the first sign. The second sign, the more I'm able to have an altruistic and loving attitude towards other beings, that means that I'm walking in the right path. The more interested I am in others, the more I'm attracted to the happiness of others and the more aversion for the suffering of others I have, the more I can see others, I can see that I'm walking on the right path. The third point is correct conduct. The more I'm able to integrate in my daily life, the spiritual practice, the way I speak, the way I interact, the more part it is of my life, and there's no separation. For example, my work life and my or from my family life, etc. No separation. Then that means that I'm training correctly. That means having a virtuous actions, a virtuous speech, virtuous mind. Then we have the great refrain. The more awareness I have of my actions, and the more I'm able to not be overwhelmed by my bad habits of body, speech, and mind, then the more I'm able to, the more trained I am. And the more my daily activities have integrated the path of the Mahayana, the six perfections, that means that I am practicing the great yoga. I'm trained, I have training in the great yoga. Let's go back quickly to the first point. So integrate all teachings into one thought. Mantra recitation, meditation on our breath, the sadhanas, karma yoga, sacred art, prostrations. There's an infinite number of beautiful things that we can do, but we need to be careful because all of that needs to help us train in this way. So it's not by counting the number of mantras that I see if I'm doing well, or if I'm able to visualize well, or if I have memorized philosophical concepts. This is part of the method, the vehicle. It's not the path itself. To see if I'm walking correctly, we need to have these 5 signs, these 5 markers. Do I maintain my balance in difficult situations? If my heart is open to others, if my conduct is correct, if I'm able to integrate everything into the great Mahayana path, if all my actions are part of the Mahayana, these are the markers that we need to observe. These are the markers. These are the indicators that we should be looking at. And we don't need to go from 0 to 100. We need to gradually just go a little bit forward, a little bit here and there. And we can see if we're doing well by using the 2 witnesses, relying on the 2 witnesses, others and ourselves. The last line says, the trained mind retains control even when distracted. Yen Kyang Tuna Jompa. I like this expression that you learn so that you can forget. Remember, think about learning how to use a musical instrument, like a violin or the piano, whatever it is. I don't know how to play anything other than the bell and the damaru, which are very easy. Imagine an instrument that's more complex, like the guitar or a violin or a piano, something that requires effort. At the beginning, you need to learn. This makes that sound, this makes that sound together. one needs to learn all the passages and learn also the theory. Once you have learned the theory, what do you need to do? Play. How often do you need to play? To play well? Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And when is it that one has completed this process of training with the instrument? When one is able to play it as an extension of one's own body, where one forgets the theory because one has fully incorporated it in himself. There's no longer needs to think, oh, I need to do this and then that. When one is able to generate, to make music naturally, spontaneously, without having to think about doing this first and then that. Like when you're learning how to drive, when is it that you know how to drive well? When you drive without thinking about it, when you are not telling yourself, okay, now I need to do this and that, and the same thing for talking and writing and reading. I mean, many things that we do in our lifetime. So this process of training is completed when one does what one does that he's trained for in a natural and spontaneous way without thinking about it. And even when one doesn't want to, one does it in the sense that when one is not thinking actively about doing it, one does it. This is the sign of having completed the training. So when we're able to have the 5 signs, even when we're not thinking about it, when naturally we don't lose our balance in difficult situations, when we have this feeling of love and compassion towards other, when naturally we have a virtuous conduct, when naturally we avoid all non-virtue, and when every aspect of our lives is integrated in the path towards enlightenment and the practice of the 6 perfections without even thinking about it. This is the sign of having completed the process. It's very easy, he says. We can get used to many things. Things come more spontaneously to us, some less. When, I mean, luckily we all have good, positive habits. But it doesn't mean that someone who is that someone needs to be Buddhist to have positive, virtuous attitudes. Absolutely not. You can imagine there are people with marvelous attitudes. I mean, just look at Buddha, who had this 1,000 lives before reaching enlightenment. But if I have a spontaneous mind of wanting to be helpful, how can I know if there's bodhichitta behind it or not? Bodhichitta requires 2 aspects. So there's a distinction. I can have a loving attitude, and it doesn't necessarily have to be bodhichitta. And the fact that it's not bodhichitta is not pejorative. Bodhicitta requires 2 aspects. There's this verse that's very important from the Bodhisattva Charvatara by Shantideva. Remember when I talked about a Sangha who went to Buddha Maitreya in the pure land of Tushita, and he received teachings. And when he came back, when he wrote this text, Samaya Lamkara, actually from Maitreya, and there's part of the text that says this one line where he gives the definition of bodhichitta, semki, this generation of the mind, semki, is the generation of the mind is for the benefit of others. And the desire for the desire to reach the highest state. So bodhicitta requires two things. At the basis, this desire to help others get out of their suffering, and at the same time requires this taking of responsibility, where one sees that to help others, one needs to help himself. So I help you, one, because I want your happiness, but I see that helping you is part of my process so that I can then help you even more. So bodhicitta itself requires a feeling of love and compassion and altruism united to a faith in oneself, to develop oneself, to reach enlightenment and help others. Something that's important here is that when we complete the training, it doesn't mean that we've reached enlightenment. It means this practice of Lojong. Why do I need this practice of Lojong? Is to get to these 5 states. And then in that state means that someone is really at a good place along the path, and then one uses that energy to work more and more on deeper things. But when we do the mind training, it's fundamental for us to understand where we're going and how we see if we're on the path or not. I repeat, our indicators are not, it's not all or nothing. Our indicators they're mostly 5, but there are others, and they're graduated. And the indicator, they're not stable. Sometimes you go up and then you come down until they become really, really immovable, stable. So it's important for us to remember this and maintain this awareness. And now all the kids are here. We welcome them. Here's a small gift for everyone. It's a special protection. Actually, what happens in this time when we created these winter and summer camps, we were to see it from a different point of view. It's a secret Lojong practice in the sense that, and it's a, for the children, it's a process to help them train in the development of wisdom, awareness, and love, but without putting it into Buddhist terms. We don't teach Buddhism, but we're accompanying them as they get into contact with their own resources. After a certain after a certain age, we need a more serious method. If we were children, we'd be, outside playing, which is not a bad idea. What I mean to say with this is that this process of mental training, we formalize it within a practice, within a text and teachings, etc. But it goes much beyond that. And at the end, the whole lifetime is a process of training, because every action we do, we're constantly transforming ourselves in one way or the other. We don't have this choice to transform or to not transform. I don't know if this is clear. So the question is, I want to transform myself without any kind of awareness, reinforcing dynamics that are already existing, or do I want to transform myself with awareness in a specific chosen direction? This is our starting point. That's fundamental, because when we say when it says here that the trained mind retains control even when distracted, it means that you are a balanced being, that you have the characteristics of the 5 signs. One goes beyond the labels. One becomes that. And once one obtains those characteristics, one doesn't need a name. One can adapt, put on any label, like water. You can put it in many different containers and it adapts to all the different forms, but it's always water. So it's important to understand that once we develop these characteristics and we use these means to develop them, then we keep them in, regardless of the context we find ourselves in. I think makes me think of a Lama, Tsawaus Rinpoche. He was a neighbor in India. He's very strong, very, very big. And in his previous life, he was a very important Lama, well known. He left Tibet even before 1959. He was extremely strong and tall. And then he started, he went into actually into like boxing or wrestling, and he was so strong. Someone said that he was able to like stop cars there was a competition of like stopping trains. That they would massage him by beating him, and then he left that and he became a Christian minister. And he had hidden images of Buddha. We had a very particular life, but what's interesting that there's no predefined path. Once one has one's qualities, and then he adapts them to the context in which he finds himself, and maybe the way to come into contact with others and have that space to come into contact. Maybe it's by doing competitions, like wrestling competitions, or maybe it's by joining a monastery and becoming a monk. Maybe it's becoming a chef. What's important is that when we train and one has completed this training or goes towards the completion of this training, what the person actually does and who you are, this is not important. The essence becomes more and more important, and one adapts himself to the reality in which he finds himself to be at the service of Dharma, and this can manifest itself in very unusual ways. And what I mean to say with this process of training, we do it within this formal context of teaching. But once one has realized it, it means at that point one is free. One is free to adapt it to every situation, to 1,000 different ways, because one gets out of this structure, because one has become that. Is that clear? And that's why it's really important. I saw Lama Ganchen, for example. He had this ability to adapt himself to any situation. He had this malleability. Sometimes I would see him sometimes like a chameleon. He was able to adapt to everything and transform himself in a marvelous way, but always adapting himself according to the context and the best way to be of benefit without ever losing his essence. So it's this trained mind that retains control. Maintaining this control means this trained mind keeps the 5 signs, its own peace, wisdom, love, even when one isn't thinking specifically about it, because one has become that. And that is where we want to get. Let's try to connect one with the fact that to integrate all the teachings into one thought, into all the Dharma. Remember that Dharma is found in when we eat or when we're at work, interacting with others, in the relationship in a couple, with our children, and in all relationships, every context of our life. Let's say these are all dharmas, if we want to call them that, but we need to make it so that all of these interactions go in the same direction. This is a sign that we're practicing correctly. Another sign is when there aren't any more situations that are not good situations to practice the Dharma. That's another sign that we're practicing well. And for me, one of the greatest beauties of these teachings is that they give us all the tools necessary to be able to shape, to transform every situation of our lives. Because I'm sure that if we look at everyone's life, the life of every person, we say, oh, well, I don't have time to practice the Dharma. You don't know what my life is like. You don't, because I live like this and I need to work here. I need to do that. Because I have these problems, I have those problems. I'm sure that if we have a competition of problems, we're all winners. the point is, every situation is a good situation to train in the light, to train in the path, train in bodhichitta and wisdom and love. And the means to do that have been given to us. It's not enough to receive these teachings. We need to, and to try to remember them every once in a while. We need to, with periodically, we need to see if we're doing the right thing or not. One can, every full moon, for example, every new moon, once every 3 months, let's do this check, at least, 4 times a year, the winter and the summer solstice and the 2 equinoxes. So we have something external that reminds us that we need to do this at least once a year. It's important for us to take a moment physically, time, with awareness and space, to look at what we've done and check where we're going. And it's not a review of what we've done externally. It's a review of these five markers, these 5 indicators. And this is important because when we're following a healing treatment, for example, a cure, it's happened to me. Like, actually, in these days, I need to actually go and do a blood test. And now the doctor said, now we need to check and see what the situation is. And so the indicators are the blood tests. And so we could say, okay, well, this is going well. That needs to be checked. And so we look a little bit, the diet here, this medicine here, we try to adapt. So we need indicators to see if we're doing the right thing. And we have indicators. So these indicators need to be checked from time to time to see if we're following correctly, if we're doing the right thing. And for this, I invite you to use your creativity. And so from time to time, check yourselves. And I remind you what I said before. These indicators. These indicators don't just like our health. I mean, if we took a blood test every day, there'll be a moment where it won't be always the same or constant. It's not a constant increase or decrease. There'll be changes, and in the same way, our indicators will be a little bit up, a little bit down. If we're able to look over time at the various checks that we've done, if we're practicing well, we'll see a graph that goes up, but if we look at it closely, maybe it's up and down. So within there are highs and lows, but the general path, the direction is to grow, because our habits are recurring. That's normal. But so we should try to make, ideally our bad habits, when they manifest, the period in between should be shorter and shorter, and when they do manifest, with less intensity. And of course, there'll be moments when stronger things come out. I'm saying this because sometimes there's this thing where people might think, oh, I've wasted my time. Things look like they were going well, but then look at what has happened. And that's normal. When it seems that you're becoming the best of bodhisattvas, the highest, and then you see some deep anger or hatred towards someone or a very selfish moment. And it's interesting because the 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 better we're doing, the more our ego tries to rebel, tries to find skillful means to trick us, and selfishness manifests as maybe even altruism. So don't worry if you see that along the path there are relapses. There is a repeating of habits. I mean, we have these negative habits. They're not concepts, they're habits. So with an attitude, a fundamental attitude of acceptance and kindness towards ourselves. This is fundamental along the path. I need to accept where I am, and I direct myself where I want to go. We repeat that with a certain frequency. These markers help us to understand mid and long term if we're doing the right thing, not short term. They're mid and long term, and that's why 4 times a year is enough. If you're more trained, maybe once a month at the most, because within there are highs and lows. But when we're able to see with a wider optic and see, oh, this is a situation that repeats itself every year. Like, let's say the Christmas festivities. I say, oh, okay, I used to react like this and now I react like that. When we're able to see that and gradually direct ourselves and celebrate the positive things, our conquests. If instead, if we see that there's been a fall instead of a conquest, let's remember that sometimes they're not steps backwards, but the path is like a spiral. So we go by the same spots, but on a higher level, and sometimes we fall into the same traps. And then there are other, and sometimes it's not a relapse, it's just seeing the stain that we hadn't seen before, because as I go on and the more dirt I take away, the more I'm able to see to see the dirt. For example, the higher the standards of cleanliness, the more we're trained to see the slightest of impurities. The standards of cleanliness in India were much lower. But it doesn't mean that it was dirtier before. It just means your standard has closed. And sometimes along the path, we have this sensation that we've gotten worse. And for different reasons. One, because at a certain point, we're able to see something that before we weren't able to. I realize that I have an attitude that I had never noticed. Another possibility is that sometimes even if we try to go in one direction, there's a kind of rebellion of our attitude, of our ego. No, I don't accept this change. There's a kind of counterattack sometimes. But it's part of the path. So what I mean to say is, it's good to check these indicators to see if we're going in the right direction. Remind ourselves that everything we do in life is part of this training. every action transforms us in one way or the other. But one more time, I remind you to do it with an attitude that is of acceptance and love towards ourselves. This is very important, okay? That's the basis to then love others. What happens is this: when one sees that there's a block, one sees that something's not going well, is not able to understand its nature, where it comes from, and sometimes one sees it but doesn't know how to face it, we set it aside. We we take we take that first step, which is to not get overwhelmed by it. I see a certain habit. I try not to materialize it, even if I don't understand its root, where it comes from, but I recognize it as a stain. And so that first step has already been taken. The awareness. Remember, we talked about the three difficulties. The first is already done, seeing it, and then I have to practice the other two, which is to not be taken by it, and then I need to look for its antidote. But when we see that stain, we see that negative conditioning, it's already the first step to face it. And we need a lot of patience with ourselves. Sometimes it's a question, I mean, it's not a linear path. Our path, even this training, is much more similar to how we do a puzzle. If you need to put a puzzle together, imagine a 10,000 piece puzzle. What do? Imagine you take one piece of the puzzle and you say, okay, what's the next one? And you go through the other, all the other pieces, and you look for that second piece. You say, oh, I found it. Okay, what's the next one after that? You need an infinite amount of time to finish that puzzle. Instead, what's the better way to do a puzzle? You put out the pieces. You start separating by colors. First, you do the borders. You see some images. You see that this one goes with that one, and you put it a little bit on this side, a little bit that side, and little by little, I put together little portions and put together. And our path is similar to this. I work a little bit on this side, a little bit there. There's something we don't understand. There are pieces we have no idea where they go. We just set them aside, and in the meantime, we work on what we can do, and little by little, it all comes together and the training is complete when we put in that last piece. So it's important here to have this attitude with patience and acceptance of oneself. And with this, we conclude the fifth point of this 7-point mind training. And in the next 2 days, we will see the next 2 points. I'm very happy that I was able to maintain my program, which was to look at 1 point per day, because usually I'd always have to really hurry to get through these last 2 points, and instead it's very important. So tomorrow we have 2 days to see the commitments of mind training, and then what's called the precepts. They're commitments and precepts. They are guidelines that we set to practice correctly the mind training, and they're very important. So now it's time for our dedications.
Drove munsela takto ne gyurchi kewa kunto yanda lama dang Dralme cheki pela long ching Sadan lamge yunten rabzone Dorje change kopa nyur tobesho Nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shing Ninsen taktu delek pe Koncho sumki jingi lob Koncho sumki ngodrubut sol Kuncho sumki tashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Omahon Tembala me Sangye Rinpoche, Kyobala me Tamchu Rinpoche, Drimbala me Gendu Rinpoche, Kyamne Kuncho Sumla Chopa, Locho Sambo Pagyu Treshi Patuche Tempe Trinle Yar, Pegedrolo Zambe Zebra Che Panden Lame Shela Chopa. Buon appetito.
Have a good lunch. Thank you, everyone.